Hello and welcome to the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I have been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we are continuing to move forward through another offseason together. As always, you can find our 100% free 24/7 boots on the ground coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars every day on social media such as Facebook and Twitter when you follow us at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. All right, folks, for today's episode, OTAs are now firmly in the rearview mirror. Tomorrow we will have a preview for mandatory minicamp, but with OTAs now firmly behind us, I want to talk about three players who I think stock has risen as a result of OTAs. Three players who I think, at least from the outside media perspective, are better off today than they were when OTA started. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean better off in terms of where the franchise and the coaching staff and the front office sees them, because obviously they have their own evaluations, they have their own plans. They just simply have more information than we do on the outside. With that said, there are several players who, I watched throughout OTAs, both how they performed and how the Jaguars are kind of doing things around them. So there are three players who I think stock is going up after OTAs. One of them, very easily, Buster Brown at cornerback. I think if the Jaguars played a game today, I think Buster starts across from Tyson Campbell. He had a really successful offseason, program in terms of practices, a lot of ball production, was able to get his hands on a lot of footballs, able to disrupt a lot of passes. I'd say, and we saw, I think 4 of the 10 OTA practices. So there are 6 OTA practices we didn't see. So take this with that context. But in the 4 OTA practices we did see, I think he was probably the most disruptive cornerback in terms of just, pass breakups, stuff like that. He really, in my opinion, is a guy who is set to thrive in their zone coverage defense. They talked a lot about having vision on the quarterback. He has really good instincts. He has really good, ability to drive on the ball. His frame, his game is really built around being able to have eyes on the quarterback. So if you guys remember last year, I was like, I don't know. I don't know how he fits in a Ryan Nielsen defense. And despite the odd fit, he played better than I thought he would. But I think this defense is going to be a better fit for Monteric Brown. I think that, if we're, judging who's winning that cornerback battle across from Tyson Campbell between him and Jarrian Jones, I'd probably say Buster Brown right now. And that's not saying Jarrian Jones hasn't done well. I thought Jarrian Jones had another good offseason. I remember last year's OTAs. He was literally phenomenal. I think he had another solid one this year. It's just Buster Brown, to me, is the corner who has stood out throughout the OTA process. So, and it's not just me either. The Jaguars coaches, Ron Miles, the de facto cornerbacks coach, Anthony Campanile, Liam Cohen, they've all had very positive things to say about Buster Brown. So I think if you want to talk about players whose stocks are rising, I think Buster Brown probably has to be, at least in my opinion, one of the very first names that you mentioned. All right, the second name, somebody like this is a case where by stock rising, I mean, in my perspective, from the outside media view, I don't think his stock is rising with the Jaguars because his stock has always been high, and that is Damiere Brown. I mean, the Jaguars are outright telling people ever since they signed Damiere Brown that, hey, we're super high on this guy. We think he's going to have a great year. I remember Tony Bazzelli did an interview the day of the NFL draft, and, it was basically told, hey, receiver is still a pretty big need, right, Tony? And like number 2 receiver. And he said that, more or less that they disagree with that assessment. They believed in Damiere Brown. So I don't think when I say Damiere Brown's stock is rising, that it means from their perspective, because they've always been high on it. James Gladstone said he's been high on Damiere Brown since he was coming out the 2021 NFL draft. Les Snead wasn't surprised at all when the Jaguars signed Damiere Brown as a result. And the consistent messaging from the Jaguars since they signed Brown has been, hey, this is a guy that they're very high on. So when I say his stock is rising, I mean, from my perspective, I'll tell you guys, my opinion of the Damiere Brown signing today compared to the day it happened has done, a pretty big jump. If I had to put a grade on it when it happened, I probably would have said like C minus. I kind of shrugged at it. I kind of thought, okay, that's a interesting option for your number 2 receiver, just based on his past production. 2 factors have changed that for me. One, obviously drafting Travis Hunter. Now, Damiere Brown is your number 3 receiver. That's a pretty good place to be in. He's not even a number 3 receiver every game. There are some games where he'll probably be the second most productive. Maybe even some games where he'll be the most productive because he's clearly a fit for Liam Cohen's system. He's good on screens. They can get him the ball in other ways, manufactured touches. He's a good blocker. He has the speed to win downfield. Him and Trevor Lawrence have had a pretty good connection throughout OTAs. He's somebody who, I'd say probably was one of the most impressive players overall in OTAs. So you saw very few bad reps. You saw the veteran experience. You saw, in my opinion, a guy with a chip on his shoulder. He knows this is a big year for him. He signed the 1-year, $10 million contract with Jaguars. If he can have a big year this year, he can completely cash in free agency next season, whether that's with the Jaguars or someone else. So Damiere Brown, I was really impressed by him in OTAs. And now that he's not the clear, de facto number 2 receiver, and they have a little more variety in the room, I think that's a good thing for Damiere Brown. So I think, at least in my eyes, his stock is definitely rising. And I have a different perception of him as a player than I did when the Jaguars first signed him in free agency in March. Last one. This one might, be a little peculiar to some people. I'm going to go Travis Etienne. I believe, as of today, that if I had to guess who has the most touches out of the Jaguars running back room this year, I think Travis Etienne. I don't think they're going to trade him. And I think part of that is because he's just not a very tradable player. Not a lot of teams are wanting to take on I think it's $6 million contract, something like that, 1 year for running back. So I think he was already going to stay with the Jaguars. But when you look at, the room that they have right now, Tank Bigsby, he's a grinder. He's a physical runner. I think that Cohen's offense just fits Etienne a little bit more because Etienne can do more as a receiver. You can do more in terms of manufactured touches with him. He's much better in the screen game. Bigsby, for as talented as he is as a runner, just has not been a productive pass catcher in the NFL. So I think all those things, Etienne makes more sense, to lead the Jaguars backfield. Didn't you look at Bashal Tune? Tune is somebody who, has a ton of speed, home run ability, can, really score from any part of the field. But did I see a guy who's ready to go in there and just dominate touches and carries right away? I didn't. And that's not to, say down on him or anything. And obviously it was only OTAs. They're not in pads, and running back is probably, after offensive and defensive line, the toughest position to gauge and evaluate in OTAs, just because due to the lack of pads, you're not seeing how they finish runs. You're not seeing the physicality, etc. But what I will say is I didn't come away from one of the 4 practices I watched and was blown away by Tune. I'd say LaQuint Allen, honestly, left a stronger impression. And that's not, I know they'll probably be aggregated. That's not saying I'm saying Tuden is going to be the Jaguars' number 4 running back. That's not it at all. I think he's definitely going to get some run. But I just think as of right now, the way things are trending and where things are at today, especially with his fumble issues, Travis Etienne, in my opinion, is the Jaguars' number 1 running back right now. And obviously, LaQuint Allen, offers a lot as a pass catcher, offers a lot in terms of pass protection. Could be their 3rd down back, in my opinion. But if the season were today, I think it is Travis Etienne leading the Jaguars' backfield throughout the duration of the 2025 season. And to me, that means the stock is up. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode. You can find us on all podcast platforms such as Apple, Spotify. Please follow, like, subscribe, leave reviews, whatever you can when you find us at the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. And you can also find all of our videos, interviews, practice highlights, etc. on our YouTube channel at Sports Videos on SI.